You might have already heard of the 5 C's of Arizona, the driving forces that helped build our state's economy. These things are copper, cattle, citrus, cotton, and climate. Each of these things has played an important role in turning the wheels of industry in the Grand Canyon state. But there's another force that might be just as important. It doesn't have as much to do with what's down here on the desert floor, but rather what we put up into the skies above us. That's right. The 6th important word to know about Arizona is aerospace. Aerospace is the branch of industry that has to do with aircraft and spacecraft, like airplanes, helicopters, balloons, rockets, and satellites. Believe it or not, Arizona is one of the most important places in the United States for aerospace. Today, we'll explore why that is, how it came to be, and what it means for us today. As with many stories in modern American history, this story goes back to the Second World War. World War II was the largest war in the history of the world, taking place between September 1st of 1939 all the way up to September 2nd of 1945. There were 2 big groups of countries participating in the war. The Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan fighting the Allied powers of Great Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and the United States. In 1941, the war had already been going on for some time, but the US was officially neutral, meaning they weren't actively participating in the war. That all changed on the morning of December 7th, 1945, when the Japanese Navy attacked a US naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Before that day, the US had been making aircraft to help Great Britain and France with their efforts, but just a few days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, on December 11th, 1945, the US officially joined the fight. Now, as I mentioned, the US hadn't exactly been watching the war from the sidelines before this day. We had been reactivating old military bases and even building some new ones. We knew it wouldn't be long before we had to enter the war, and we had to be ready when that day came. In Arizona, this change began a year before Pearl Harbor, in 1940. By the end of the war, Arizona would have 14 major airfields for training new pilots and testing new aircraft. One of the most important air bases in Arizona was Luke Air Force Base, named after Lieutenant Frank Luke Jr., a native to Arizona nicknamed the Arizona Balloon Buster, as a pilot in World War I, where his achievements earned him the Medal of Honor. Construction at Luke Air Force Base began in March of 1941, and the base was officially activated in April. Pilot training began here in June, again, all before the attack on Pearl Harbor. In the First World War, when namesake Frank Luke was a pilot, planes were very different. They were made out of lighter materials like wood and canvas, because the engines at the time weren't as powerful as they would be later. For this new war, planes would be made out of durable materials like aluminum and steel, and were stronger, tougher, and way faster than the planes of the previous war. At Luke, the planes flown were the AT-6 Texan, the P-40 Warhawk, the P-51 Mustang, and the P-38 Lightning. Pilots training at Luke needed about 2.5 months to learn how to fly their planes, after which they would ship off to fight in Europe or sometimes in the Pacific. One famous person at Luke was Captain Barry Goldwater, who was the director of ground operations at the base in 1942. He would have a long career in the Air Force, achieving the rank of 2-star general, but he is most known for being a U.S. Senator, representing Arizona from 1953 to 1987. By the end of the war, over 17,000 pilots had been trained at Luke. It became the largest fighter base in the Air Force and the largest base for single-engined aircraft in the US. Today, Luke still trains pilots, flying the F-35 Lightning II and the F-16 Fighting Falcon. During the war, Arizona was seen as a good place for air bases for a few reasons. First of all, the warm weather made it possible for pilots to train and fly any time of year. But in addition, the wide open spaces made it far easier and safer to train pilots without many large population centers to worry about. Crucially, the year-round training of pilots helped make the case for not just flying planes in Arizona, but building them too. Before the war, big companies like Boeing, Lockheed Vega, and Douglas made most of the aircraft. But as the war developed, all kinds of companies got into the aircraft making business. Even car companies like Ford and General Motors. Here in Arizona, parts for the B-17 bomber were made at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. With this happening successfully, Paul W. Litchfield, the president of Goodyear Tire and Rubber, convinced leaders in Washington that Arizona was the ideal place for aircraft manufacturing. He said that the weather meant workers could build outside rather than inside, and pilots could test every day. In addition, being located inland, away from the coasts, protected factories from potential attacks. The case was heard, and Arizona became much more important to the war effort. In World War II, new planes were constantly being designed and produced, and each new plane needed a factory to build it. Goodyear Tire and Rubber created a new company, Goodyear Aircraft, to do just that. During the war, it became one of the largest producers of aircraft parts in the world. Over half of the work of building aircraft was done by women, since many men were away at war. Before this, it was unusual for women to have the chance to be active members of the workforce. An enduring symbol of this is Rosie the Riveter, a design of a strong woman encouraging others to do their part and work in factories. In total, over 7,500 people worked in the Goodyear facility alone, with over 56% of those being women. The Air Force wasn't the only branch of the military operating out of Arizona. The Navy did too. When most people think of the desert, the Navy usually doesn't immediately come to mind. Yet, on the corner of Buckeye Road and Litchfield Road, Litchfield Naval Air Station served a very important role in the war. Today, the site is home to Goodyear Phoenix Airport. So, what was a naval air station doing here? Well, it was a place to receive and test Navy planes that were being modified by Goodyear Aircraft just next door. After the war, it became a storage facility for military aircraft, again helped by the warm and dry climate. As many as 5,000 planes were stored at the facility. It was decommissioned in 1967, but the planes stored there didn't go far. Many of them were moved to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson. So, what became of all of this? Well, today, Arizona remains a prime location for aerospace. Luke Air Force Base is the largest fighter training base on Earth, and others like Davis-Monthan and Marine Corps Air Station Yuma operate today. Inspired by the legacy of Goodyear Aircraft, companies like Boeing, Lockheed, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman produce cutting-edge technologies right here. Many World War II veterans returned to Arizona after the war to live with their families, and the population of the state grew from 500,000 people in 1940 to over 750,000 10 years later. While one of the 5 C's, climate, was largely the reason that aerospace was possible here, you could say this industry has brought plenty of people to live here and work. It also brings tourists to see things like the Davis-Monthan Boneyard and the Pima Air and Space Museum, both located just outside of Tucson. When an area is appealing to an industry, the economy of that area flourishes. Without the aerospace industry, Arizona, and the things in the skies above it, might look very different today. So, take a moment to think. What other kinds of unique features of Arizona might affect what it's like to live and work here? What kind of industries in your community make it special?